Recently, Asmongold, a popular streamer on Twitch, made some comments about loot boxes. And I wanted to respond to this and share whether he's right or wrong and what the research currently shows about it. But first, let's check out the clip.
My opinion on loot boxes, they should not exist. That's the whole opinion. Yep. Why not? They simulate gambling and they take advantage of people that have gambling disorders and gambling tendencies. Also, they appeal primarily to children because video games are marketed to people that are younger, and I think that it gets kids into a mentality of gambling that serves as a gateway towards actual gambling whenever they become older. I don't support any loot boxes at all, and I think that all cosmetics should be buyable directly from the store for a certain price. Period.
Alright, so that was really interesting and there's so much I want to unpack about it. But first, I just want to share my name is Cameron Dare and I'm the founder of GameQuitters.com, which is a support community for people with gaming issues. It's something I struggled with myself, and over the last 10 years, I've been very much on the front lines, speaking and working with people from all over the world who are struggling with gaming in their lives. This work has led me to train a lot of professionals around the subject, and one of their biggest concerns is on the link between gaming and gambling. So let's look at more of what Asmongold shared and whether it's true or not. The first thing we need to be able to acknowledge is that video games, as much as they're fun and seen as entertainment, they are digital products that are optimized using persuasive psychology in order to make money. Games nowadays look much more like this, where they're accessible in your pocket and you have the opportunity to spend money through microtransactions and in-app purchases. The smartphone really revolutionized gaming by making it much easier to play and much easier to spend money. So the gaming industry isn't just focused on acquiring users, but also profiting from them as well. And for proof of this, we can just look at their own job postings. So this is a job posting by Electronic Arts, where they're looking for a psychologist to join their game design team. And they share, in fact, in the description that we believe all game designers are, in a sense, experimental psychologists. So the gaming industry is making intentional decisions in what they're pursuing, how they're designing games, and ultimately what their incentives are, which are to maximize profit for shareholders. Now, the gaming industry can monetize in multiple different ways, but here are 4 of them. You can sell progress to people who like to achieve. You can sell the ability to customize your character and express yourself to more social players. You can sell the opportunity to win to those who like competition. And for people who like to consume content, you can just sell them additional content. And this is exactly where loot boxes have come in. Loot boxes are mystery items that contain randomized rewards. They may be bought with real-world money or with virtual currency. Items within loot boxes vary in rarity from more common items to rare ones to legendary. And there are different types. Some are just skins for your character. Others might be items that actually give you an advantage within the game. And as we go forward over the next couple of years, NFTs and crypto technology will be a big part of loot boxes as well. Now, some with real world value give you the opportunity to trade them or sell them or even bet them. And rare items can be worth thousands of dollars. Now, using real world money to get virtual currency in order to actually get loot boxes within a game is one of the workarounds that companies use to evade gambling law. So gambling law doesn't typically contain virtual currency as part of it, and thus they're able to have a gambling-like experience without being classified under gambling law. Now, I'll share more about how loot boxes are harming different people's lives, but one of the way they take advantage of people's psychology is by using real-world money to turn it into virtual currency. And often what occurs is that we're not very good as humans at being able to actually understand the value of the money we're spending when that number that we originally spent is changed into another one. So for instance, here, if you've spent $18, $17.99, and you've got 2,000 coins plus the 150 bonus coins, it's hard to actually do the math, especially in the moment, on how much your 500 coins are actually worth in real world value. Instead, you're just playing the game, and it's like you can open a loot box for a certain amount, and you just see the coins that you have. You don't necessarily actually equate the amount of money. This is even more true for younger people, which is another point that Asmongold made, which we'll get into. Now, loot boxes have been incredibly profitable for the gaming industry, and they're anticipated to continue to be profitable far into the future. So loot boxes are anticipated to generate over $20 billion by 2025, and year-by-year growth is about 5%. Now, other industries have taken notice, and recently Atari actually released an NFT within the loot box. Mystery Brand is another website that released real-world items with a loot box mechanic, and NBA Top Shot also released NFTs within a loot box mechanic as well. So one of the issues that Asmongold brought up was that loot boxes simulate gambling. So let's look at whether this is true or not. First, a study came out that found that video game loot boxes are psychologically akin to gambling. And although research is really helpful to be able to discern a bunch of this different information, I also like to just look at the animations. So here on the right, you have a typical slot machine animation, and on the left, you have a CSGO case opening. As you can see with the animation, they are very, very similar. And if I had the sound on, you would also be able to hear that the sound and the sound effects are also very similar as well. So when we look at the similarities between loot boxes and, say, slot machines, we see they share some common characteristics. First, they share a random distribution of prizes. They also share variable value of prizes. They have near-miss features and the visual and sound cues that are associated with participation and reward. Now, gambling is traditionally classified using prize, chance, and consideration. So prize is anything of value the sponsor awards in a promotion. Chance is a process beyond the participants' direct control to determine the outcome. And consideration means requiring money or significant effort to participate. So if we look at prize, chance, and consideration, loot boxes and slot machines both are actually quite similar as well. Now, other research has investigated how the simulated gambling-like experiences of, for instance, social casino games impact players and whether or not they migrate to gambling. So a few things have been found out. First, simulated gambling normalizes gambling by making it appear more positive, safe, and socially accepted. It may also increase a young person's confidence in gambling due to the relative ease of winning. And so with loot boxes, you're able to engage in a gambling-like experience, and this can give you more of a perspective on what gambling with quote-unquote real money in the future could be like. It also normalizes it. It also introduces it to you at a much younger age, and these are all risk factors for gambling problems in the future. Simulated gambling may also lead to real-world gambling, and a study by Kim in 2015 found 26% of people who played social casino games had migrated to online gambling as well. Now, simulated gambling also increases someone's risk of not just a gaming problem, but also a gambling problem. And that's going to bring us to the next point that Asmongold made, which was, do loot boxes take advantage of people with gambling problems or gambling tendencies? Now, there has been a bunch of research that has investigated the link between gaming and gambling, primarily by David Zendle and his team, who have done really fantastic work. Now, they have found there's a link between the amount gamers spent on loot boxes and the severity of their problem gambling. They also found that within the top 5% of spenders on loot boxes, 45% were problem gamblers. It's also been found that 68% of people who purchase loot boxes have engaged in skins gambling, And people who engage in skins gambling are at greater risk of gambling problems compared to those who do not. Now, the Zendle studies, a number of them have actually been replicated independently by other labs around the world, which I think generally in research, that's a really important factor to be considering. Now, loot boxes have been also found to be developed to exploit a player's vulnerability and reinforce the need to spend money. And this leads to real world harm, which I think is the main crux of this whole topic. We can get into the debate about gambling law. We can get into a debate about what research says or not. At the end of the day, though, this is about how it's impacting people in the real world. And there's so many stories, I'll share a couple of them, but people are being harmed by these design features. And I think that the gaming industry needs to take so much more responsibility to be able to prevent these sorts of issues and be able to help people who are being harmed as well. Simple example, someone spent over $220,000 on microtransactions in a Transformers game. Another example was the kids emptied our bank account playing FIFA, and my son spent over £3,000 in one game. Mo shares, my addiction was slot machines, which is regulated in my country. After years of being addicted, Mo had got free and had stopped. But loot boxes started it all over again. They have the same dopamine triggers, cool colors, and sound effects that please the addicted. Cairns shares, I was heavily addicted to Twitch around 2012 to 2016, and watching popular CSGO players open cases by the hundreds influenced me to buy cases of my own. So here we see the influencer culture and streaming actually leading to normal individuals spending money, engaging in gambling-like experiences through video games. And another story, Jack has spent $3,500 in 8 weeks on Steam. He was sacked from his most recent job. Many of his transactions are over $100 buying and selling skins, but he doesn't really understand that he's buying, but he's not really getting that money back in real terms. This mom shared that she can see deep down he knows it's wrong, but it's got him in a grip. That sense of loss of control is a big part of someone who has a gambling problem or a gaming problem. And I think when it comes to loot boxes, that compulsive spending and difficulty to stop is a big part of the process. And this story by my friend Jonathan Pennickett, who shared that he actually was able to purchase a little bit of happiness every single time he was buying loot boxes, but eventually this led him to blow his university. This actually led him to blow his university savings playing FIFA. Now, whether loot boxes are technically gambling or not is less important to me than the fact that they're actually harming people's lives. And research has also found that loot boxes may be harmful in and of themselves, regardless of whether or not they're technically gambling. And loot boxes and predatory microtransactions have led to the possibility of the increase of being financially harmed by playing video games, specifically through compulsive spending. So when traditionally gaming was seen as something that maybe would just occupy a lot of your time, or something that maybe the toxicity of games was leading to kind of harm in the real world, now with predatory microtransactions, or predatory monetization, I should say, it's led to people being able to experience financial harm in gaming in a new way, which traditionally was more associated as an indicator of a gambling problem. Now, Asmongold also shared that for him, loot boxes target children. And one way we can look at this is just looking at how loot boxes are prevalent in so many different games. So they're in most modern games, 59% of top iPhone games, 36% of games on Steam, 63% of top games in the Google Play Store, 49% of games rated by the industry as suitable for children 7+, and 93% of games rated suitable for children 12+. So these mechanics are in games for children, and there are many ways that they appeal to children as well. For instance, children tend to be very social players. High school is all about social status and the fear of missing out, which makes young people particularly vulnerable when skins and items in games and loot boxes are a big part of that. Only 32% of parents said they even knew what a loot box was, and less than a third of them actually were able to select the correct definition. So when the industry says, well, it's parents' responsibility, well, parents often don't even know that these sorts of things can be in a game for kids. Now, the industry can also say, well, we have warning labels, and it's like, well, okay, the warning label basically just says in-app purchases. It doesn't say gambling-like experiences. It doesn't really give people that much information. And if they release loot boxes post-launch, then all the physical copies of that game won't even include that warning label anyways. So I think it's disingenuous, and certainly there are a lot of concerns around how loot boxes are in games targeting kids. Now, to sell more loot boxes, they're coming up with increasing ways to innovate on them. So recently, the Spectrum skin was released in Valorant using celebrity DJ Zed, who obviously has a very young audience. And in this, it was taking the skin within a game and giving it unique sound effects if you had it. And again, this is something that's going to appeal to younger people by making the skin more unique, more rare, and especially when it's associated with someone they look up to, they're going to want it. In Fortnite, there have been cases of kids actually being bullied for not having the skin that maybe other people do, or if they have the default skin, they're actually bullied and called the default, right? And so the point is that the culture of gaming has led to one where it's very much based on social status and fear of missing out, and skins and using loot boxes to get those skins is a big part of that process. There are other alarming trends though with young people. 15% of 11 to 16-year-olds in the UK have stolen money from parents to buy loot boxes. Now I hear these stories in my inbox all the time. 11% of 11 to 16-year-olds in the UK have placed bets using in-game items. And again, those in-game items, they're often using loot boxes and that mechanic in order to obtain. And then they're using those items to bet as 11 to 16-year-olds. It's wild. Now, 39% of 11 to 16-year-olds who engaged in skin betting in the last month had gambled on other activities as well. And so this brings up a lot of concerns of whether loot boxes are leading to individuals learning about gambling and then actually becoming gamblers. Now, one issue with loot boxes or just in-game purchases is that often gift cards can be a way for individuals to obtain money to get skins without having to spend their parents' real money. So for instance, Jonathan Pennickett shares that he used to go to the local convenience store and use money he was meant to use for purchasing maybe like some junk food or whatever that his parents had given him, but instead he was using it to get gift cards and then using those gift cards to get items within games through loot boxes, and that was his workaround. Now, I shared that I hear from parents all the time who share these issues. So here, somehow our credit card was attached to something that we had purchased for him, and when we took away his computer, this was 4 years ago, he got on his phone and racked up $8,000 on our credit card in Clash of Clans. Another parent shared, mine took my credit card details and spent about 5 hours just pressing the purchase button. He spent over £7,000. It's really hard to deal with, as I don't think he was even sorry, right? This was 3 years ago. Now I hear from parents like this all the time who find that they get a credit card bill in the mail without even having realized their kids were spending money. So are loot boxes a gateway to gambling? I guess this is the main crux of the issue. Now, there has been a study done that has evaluated this question, and primarily it's because the common structural structural characteristics of gaming may prime people to gambling. So gambling-like features such as loot boxes may strengthen that relationship. Now, there are different studies, and these different studies are evaluating different things. So it's not simple to just say, is it a gateway to gambling or not? There are different aspects of this. So there are studies that have evaluated the overlap between gaming and gambling involvement. There are studies that have looked at the relationship between problem gaming and problem gambling symptoms. There have also been studies that have looked at loot box spending and their relationship with gambling. So let me give you just a bit of an overview. First, on the gaming-gambling overlap, limitations of these studies include inconsistent population samples, including ages, activity engagement, and the focus of the outcome. But they have found that nearly all young people play video games, and almost 50% to 60% are gamblers. It's kind of wild to think about. Now, engagement in one activity appears to modestly increase the likelihood of participation in the other. Now, a study by Forstenall found no statistical relationship between gaming and gambling frequency when participants had to gamble at least 7 hours a week. So this somewhat means that for individuals who were gaming, they weren't necessarily going to gamble at a higher frequency above 7 hours a week, but even if they were gambling 5 hours a week, that's still quite a bit of gambling. Now, studies that have looked at gaming and gambling problems in the link, they also have somewhat mixed results. Sanders and Williams in 2019 found 10.5% of problem gamblers were classified as problem gamers, whereas 24.5% of problem gamers were found to be problem gamblers. Now, Mold and al. In 2019 did a 2-year-long study, and they found a positive relationship between problematic gaming and later problematic gambling, whereas they didn't find the reverse relationship, which means that if you were playing video games, you were more likely 2 years later to be at risk of problem gambling, whereas if you had a problem gambling issue, you weren't as likely to go and become a gamer. Now, some explanations of this can be age transition, so people just becoming old enough, for instance, to gamble, or different personality risk factors, the convergence of the game design. Games are becoming more like gambling products, and gambling products are becoming more like game products. Other issues like advertising and game-related incentives could also explain the similarities. Now, on studies that have looked at gambling and loot box spending, the association may be more of a selection effect than an exposure effect, but adolescents who gamble are more likely to engage in skins gambling, and greater viewing of esports was also associated with a greater involvement in gambling. And esports and people who watch esports are generally viewed as a exciting new demographic of potential bettors in the future. So I think esports very likely could become one of the primary ways that young people start gambling and maybe migrate to other forms of gambling in the future. So in conclusion, with this study that evaluated all the other studies, there's only a small correlation currently in the research that exists between overall gambling and video game engagement. Problem gambling symptoms do appear to positively relate to loot box purchasing. So the review overall found little convincing evidence in support of the gateway hypothesis. However, that doesn't mean that individuals who are engaging in gaming or engaging in buying loot boxes aren't being harmed, and that doesn't lead some individuals to gamble more in the future. Sometimes research doesn't always find all the intricacies of these issues, and so I always think it's just really important for us to remember to pay attention to lived experience and individuals who are coming forward saying they're struggling and they need support. So I want to quickly just share a couple solutions for everyone. How to stay safe when you're playing games or when you're engaging in spending money in games. So first, you can consider playing games without loot boxes. So an example would be playing FIFA instead of FIFA Ultimate Team. You might be playing the same game, but you're playing a different mode, which means you'll be encouraged or incentivized in a different way. Also, if you're spending money in games, make sure you have a budget, make sure you've developed healthy coping strategies outside of gaming. So that might be like working out, that might be working with a therapist, but developing healthy ways to manage stress in your life. Because when you're stressed, that leads you to want to escape, and spending excessive amounts of money in games can be part of you actually coping with the stress in your life, which is problematic in a number of ways. Be careful of social pressure and the fear of missing out, especially for young people. It's very easy to get caught up in wanting the cool skin in order to kind of have that social status at school. And there are just so many better ways to live your life than living it like that. Next, make sure you're tracking your spending. So often spending issues come because we're not really aware of how much we're actually spending. So make sure you set up tracking your spending and turn notifications on, and maybe even turn those notifications on for other individuals like your parents who can help keep you accountable. And finally, ask for help. If you have a problem with gaming or gambling, help is available, and it's totally okay to ask for help, and I encourage it. You can go to gamequotas.com. We have a ton of free resources for you. You can go to kindbridge.com, where they have a teletherapy service to help people with gaming and gambling issues. And there are a number of resources in the description below where you can get more local support depending on where you are and what kind of support you're looking for. Now, I also just want to quickly mention some policy suggestions. So we need to better inform consumers with more transparency. We need prevention programs to help people be aware of these issues, including for students and for parents. And I do believe, and I support Asmongold by sharing, that loot boxes shouldn't be available to kids. So I would like to see loot boxes regulated to 18 plus and to not be available in games designated for children. We need to prevent gambling related problems using better parental controls, and at some point we're going to have to figure out age verification in the digital age, although I do recognize there are a lot of different issues that come with that. We need to make sure we're facilitating treatment seeking and support people in recovery. We need to encourage people who are struggling to get help, and we need to provide them with opportunities to actually get that help, and not everybody can afford it. And so that's an issue as well. And I think the gaming industry should do a lot more to be able to help these people. We also need to increase the evidence base. We need more research on loot boxes and the link between gaming and gambling, but we also need more research on the link between predatory monetization and compulsive spending. We don't want to get too trapped in thinking that loot boxes are gambling, because we may actually miss the fact that people engaging with loot boxes are experiencing harm in their life, and that harm might not be a gambling harm. So we just need to make sure that we're keeping the research field open enough to make sure we're capturing all the potential issues and not just focus on gambling and gaming as a link because it's popular to talk about or it's a popular narrative in the research. So I guess that was a lot, and I hope that you got value out of that. I love talking about the research and paying attention to this stuff. It's a huge passion, and so I hope that you found value in that. And I appreciate people like Asmongold speaking out and sharing that there are issues with loot boxes and there are issues in games, especially as it relates to young people and especially children who don't have the development in their brain yet to be able to be making really good choices compared to billion-dollar companies using behavioral psychologists in order to influence their behavior. And so I think we have to be honest about this, and the industry needs to do so much more to make sure that people engaging in these products that they're selling based on fun and entertainment are not harming their life. And if they are harming their life, that they have the proper support and tools to be able to move forward and to make sure their life stays in balance and they're able to thrive. So I hope that was helpful for you. And if you're new here, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. Should loot boxes exist? Are they targeting children? Should they be classified as gambling? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll be in there interacting with you guys. But that's it for me today. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, peace.